This team building exercise is, I just call it PVC pipe. And you can see there are 2-foot sections of half of PVC's pipes, if you will, and we have 32 pieces of them. So you can do this activity with up to 35 people. You can have a few folks that don't need to have one of these, that can just be the guides on the side. Inevitably, in a group that size, you might have a couple of folks who can't do something as physical. Like this involves a little bit of running and a little bit of chaos, and so that's the group size. So first of all, your equipment is, you need, we've got 3 golf balls here, just one as a backup, but usually we use 2 because we have groups of 10. If it's a giant group of 20, groups of 10. If it's a group of 17, that's a really big group to try and do one instead of 2 simultaneous groups of 10 happening. That's okay, but I wouldn't do a group a size of bigger than 20 altogether. Okay, the other things you have are little cones like this that mark a starting point. And the other equipment are, we got some cups, and then we've got a giant bucket that this is all in. Okay, so this is how we do this. So first I like to frame it up by saying there are 2 times in life that we can't control: what's happened in the past and what's going to happen in the future. So this is an exercise in being really present. Who here ever struggles with being really present? Great, well, you're welcome. Here we go. This will help you with that. So each person will get one of these, except for the folks that you've already designated don't need them. There is an end point. The end point is about 40 feet from the starting point. The end point has this bucket. Now, if you are breaking up into 2 groups, let's just say that you have maybe 2 groups of 15. The bucket is the end point, but don't make it a competition where they're simultaneously getting to the same bucket. Have the bucket be here, and one group's 40 feet is over here, and the end point is the bucket. One group's 40 feet is way over here, and the end point is the bucket. So they're not side by side competing, because there's a little bit of chaos and whatever. Also, we don't want this to feel like a competition. You can address that before they get started too, to say, if the other group gets to success or completion faster than you, how wonderful. If you get to success before them, how wonderful. But we're going to make sure that there's no degrading of the other groups or whatever. Like, just to say a little bit of that is helpful. So essentially what's going to end up happening is they're going to roll. So this goes at the starting spot, and I tell them that 1 foot to the, let's say the left, or to the non-goal side for the first person. I'm not saying this very clearly, but that's how you start at the starting spot. So maybe an easier way is the first person straddles this cone. And then I will give the instructions, which I'm about to give to you, and then I'll hand one person, sometimes a quieter person, the golf ball, and then I'll say, go, good luck. I don't tell them that there will be multiple rounds, although there probably will be. If they really struggle and take forever, by the time they get it into the bucket, we'll say, great job, you're all done. Typically though, we say, great first round. And then they're like, what? And now, unfortunately, you've had some shrinking resources and you have to be able to do the same amount, but with less. This is now your goal. And I replace the bucket with a cup. If one group finishes before the other, you can place the cup somewhere else, because we do have multiple cups, so they can have different spots for finish lines as long as the length is still the same. I like to set a couple of rocks in the bottom of this so that it doesn't tip over. So here are the instructions I like to give. Each person can only have 1 of these pieces. All of these pieces needs to be used. There are 3 main rules. The golf ball can never drop, never go backwards, and never stop. What we mean by that is the golf ball can't drop. It can't fall out and go to the ground. If it does, you got to start over. It can't stop, meaning like if your thumb hits it by accident and you stop it, you got to start over. Also, it can't roll backwards. Like if this is the finish line end way over there, it has to perpetually, continually go that way. You can't just slow it down. You can't go backwards and then forwards. There are a few different ways that groups will do this. Typically, it's a cascading line where this is an important part. When you're setting it up, you need to make sure that there's almost like double or 1.5 the time space, because meaning it shouldn't be all 15 people do it and gets in the bucket done. It should be the 15 people do it, and then at least half of them, if not all of them, will need to run and get to the front to make it longer. Sometimes what they'll do is they will all move as a continuous line, and it's kind of it's kind of funny to watch, but there's success like that too. Success looks like the golf ball goes into the bucket and doesn't bounce out. Same with the cup. Goes into the cup doesn't fall over, the ball doesn't bounce out. So that's essentially everything. If you want to make it more challenging. It's amazing how some groups get this no problem and some groups don't. You may need to be the ethics police. And what I mean by that is just keep your eye on that it's not dropping. That one would be clear and they'd know they'd have to start over. But the stopping and rolling backwards, if you catch it, say something. Because sometimes people are like try and gloss over that happened. So if it's really easy for them, you can with the second round say, okay, only 3 people can talk. Right? The first round, there's no restrictions on who can talk and how it works. But the third round, only 3 people can talk. And you don't have to figure out who that is. They can figure out who that is. At the end, you're going to debrief. And I like to start off by saying, okay, so emotional intelligence is part of something that is, we've got intelligence by design. So I'm curious, cue into your feelings right now. What's a feeling that you just had during this exercise, during this game? And by the way, this was an exercise in resilience. If you can like work that into your debrief, awesome. In the beginning, we talked about how it's about being present, and then it's also about being resilient. And people are going to say things like frustrated, annoyed, disappointed. And it's great. Then you leaned into that. Frustrated. Who else felt frustrated? Okay, great. Tell us about it. What was frustrating? And then you can also do some debrief stuff like, okay, when it was frustrating, who here checked out? Who here was like, when is this going to be done? I'm just going to be quiet. I'm just going to tolerate this. Other people tell me what to do. I don't care. There's too many cooks in the kitchen. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that with us. No judgment. It's just interesting to observe. Who here got really goal-oriented and you got really kind of riled up and wrapped up and really intense? Anybody? And then we talk about it. And then what other feelings? And tell us more about those. Then in a lot of the team building exercises, I like to share the phrase that sometimes is attributed to Martha Beck, which is how we do anything is how we do everything. So to say, does that kind of thing show up in other parts of your life, right? Or you get frustrated, or you get checked out, or you get really excited, or you wish everybody else would be falling in line and doing things how you want them to, or what happens for you when you're given a task to do in a group that you've never done before, right? You don't know the roadmap already. So that's generally the debrief. If you need to really stretch it out and you have more time, you can do a little teaching moment and then a self-reflection moment and then a sharing moment about resilience, which is after all that debriefing. So I want you to think about a time where you've had to be resilient. First, define resilience with your neighbor. They define it. And then when they come back together, I like to say, so resilience is not grit. And some people will be like, that's what we said. Because it's also about productive perseverance. It's not pushing through no matter what, right? There have been times when even in exercises like this where we've had to stop them because it was no longer the right move to keep going because people are getting too angry. And it's not bouncing back. Some people will be like, that's what I said. Some of the resilience authors will say it's about bouncing forward. It's showing up in a new way. It's not trying to return to a previous state. You're all resilient because you've made it to this point in your life. You've all had challenges. Who's overcome some really big stuff? Just show of hands. Others of you might say, your life has been a bit easier, but it's all valid. You've all been resilient. They say that both vulnerability and connection are two of the components of resilience. There are 5 components. And if you, facilitator, want to learn more about that, you can read the 5 Practices of Highly Resilient People by Dr. Taryn. And then we're going to practice those 2 things now, vulnerability and connection. So I want you to think about a time where you've had to be really resilient. Would you write about it? And then after that, would you share with your neighbor? And bonus points for if you can share, what was the lesson? What did you gain? What did you learn from that, overcoming that hard thing? Okay, thanks.